So hi, I'm Johanna Fateman. I'm a musician and a writer, an art writer and a critic, and I've had the pleasure to get to know Charlie over the past couple of years and work with him on some text for his monograph that was published earlier this year. And I also wrote a short piece about the installation that's up now, The Waning of Justice, in the gallery. And this is, of course, Charlie himself, the filmmaker and video artist that we're here to talk about. And I thought since, I don't know how many of you were here, but I know some of you were watching Turning with us, and I thought we should start by talking a little bit about that piece and just how did it come about?
Can everyone, can we hear? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, Turning was originally a live performance that I did a collaboration with Antony and the Johnsons. Antony is a friend, had been a friend for 10 years before we worked together. And he asked me to collaborate with him on this live performance. And I had been doing live, just had started working with live video. This was 2003, 2004. And so we just, forged ahead into the unknown, and I wasn't really ready to do it, but he convinced me that it was time. And so we did this performance for 3 nights as part of the Whitney Biennial at St. Anne's in Brooklyn. And it was for an audience of 500 people, and it was Antony and his band, and then there were 13 women, or I think there were maybe only 12 in Brooklyn, and 1 woman per song, and they would stand on a turning platform and be filmed live with 2 cameras, and I was on the other side of the stage mixing their images, making portraits live, and then that was projected behind the band. And it was our dream really to take it all around the place. And about a year later, Antony became famous, so we were able to do it. And we did a short tour of Europe in 2006, and we took the entire crew, a few changes, but it was about 30 people. And we were in London and Paris and the capitals of Europe. It's just a short tour, but we weren't, there were television companies who wanted to make a documentary, but we decided that we wanted to be in control of it ourselves, so we weren't going to do it. And then 2 days before we started the tour, Antony called me from New York. I was already in London. He said, "We have to do it." So I hired a cameraman who came along with us on the tour, and we filmed the performance at the Barbican in London with 7 cameras, and then it took quite a while to get the money together to do the post-production, but so it was like a 6-year process by the time we got the film released. And that's the film that was just shown.
So to back up, for people who aren't so familiar with your career, I think what's one of the interesting things about Turning to me is that it's a documentary. You've made a few documentaries, but the documentary incorporates a rather new practice of yours, the live video mixing. So maybe you could tell us a little bit how you came, a little bit about the different stages of your career. I mean, I know they're not so distinct, but Charlie was the filmmaker in residence with the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, and then here we are today. So.
Yeah, well, it's a long journey. Just briefly, for 10 years I collaborated with Merce Cunningham from 73 to 83. making videos and films with dance. I mean, they were all made for the camera or for the video or film, whichever we were using. And then Merce would make them into a stage piece afterwards. So we weren't really filming a stage piece, we were making a film, and then he turned it into a stage piece after. So I did that. I was also a production stage manager, lighting designer, costume designer. So I did a lot of jobs, but I was a full-time employee. And then in '83, I started working with other people. I kind of wanted to get out of the studio, and his work was getting more and more pure, and I was getting more and more impure. So I started working with a bunch of other friends, making video dance works for television, both in America and Europe. And I had a period of having a lot of television commissions of making art for television and dance films for television. And at a certain point, my work started to get not appropriate for television, or that's what they thought. So I stopped doing that and did lots of different kinds of things with film. I made some documentaries. I did some short pieces. Anyway, a miscellany of things. And then in 1999 is when I had my first gallery show in a commercial gallery in New York, and also that was the year that I made this big co-production documentary about Merce Cunningham, the life and sort of intro, Merce Cunningham 101, a 90-minute film about his life and work. And that began a second period of collaboration with Cunningham, which lasted until the end of his life, for 10 years. And then in my other work, I've worked with a lot of different, collaborated with a lot of different people in all in the arts, culture, musicians, performance artists, and dancers, and made various kinds of pieces out of the work, taking work that's live and translating it into media, and where I felt my job was really to make the work vivid in media. And then and I've always kept it on wanting to do new things I hadn't done before. So that's been the motivation of most of my work. And in 2003, Douglas Dunn asked me to do costumes and video for a dance performance he was doing. And I said, the technology had just become available where you could kind of do live video mixing off a laptop, pretty low res, but so I said I didn't want to do a video landscape for them to dance in front of. I wanted to do live performance with them. So that was the beginning of my work in live performance, and live video, and since then I've done live installations in museums and live. This turning was live on the stage, and
I remember you telling me when you did the Yvonne Rainer portrait, Rainer Variations, that it was so intricate, it was like needlepoint, and you wanted to get out of the editing room.
Well, that was also, I realized when I was really ready for it, because it was just exactly as you said, that piece. I was alone in the editing room and working on by frame, and feeling like, if I just put in enough hours, I know it'll come out good. But I thought that was a little too safe. So I took a risk, and really doing live video, there's so many elements that you can't control, and so I thought that was really challenging, and it really opened things up for me in a big way. And then recently I've been doing these large-scale video installations like the one that's being shown here, which is my most recent one.
So you kind of got pulled back into the...
Well, at a certain point I was just doing live stuff, and I realized people weren't wanting to show things, and I had nothing recent to show except by doing it. So I thought, okay, I'll do something where I don't have to be there.
I was thinking today about when I heard that there would be a screening of Turning in conjunction with this event, I was thinking about, Turning and The Waning of Justice, and how they're very different works. I mean, one is, a film, a documentary that uses live performance material from live performances, and then this monumental installation. So in a sense, they couldn't be more different as far as like the kinds of work that you make. But it's so interesting to me watching Turning today, because Charlie just told me they started in 2004. So yeah, so the visibility of transgender people is, really having a moment right now, which hopefully will continue and grow into, a larger awareness of the diversity of genders and experiences of people. But this was quite early in terms of that discourse being mainstream.
It was interesting. We had of the women that were the people that I made portraits of during Turning, many of them were transgender. And it really started out as really the most marginal group of downtown. Downtown is already marginal in terms of the art, and then the most marginal group in that was really these women. And just recently, I showed, had something at the midnight moment in Times Square. So I took over a bunch, like 48 screens in Times Square, and I showed material from that first Turning. So it took like 10 years to go from, which I think, from the most marginal downtown to Times Square, which we were all so excited about. Yeah. Just the visibility and having those images, even not knowing exactly how they registered in Times Square, but so that was one thing about it, and it was we did feel like we were doing God's work when we were making Turning and taking it out of the but at the same time, when I made the film, I didn't want to exploit that aspect. It's more that's one of the reasons we didn't really want a television producer to get involved, because I know exactly what they would have done.
Right. Something sensationalized.
Sensationalized, right.
Yeah. So that was going to be my question. I think that in New York, knowing some of those people and being in kind of a milieu where there are trans people, it doesn't seem so, I guess when I first saw Turning, I didn't think of it as a political film or an activist film per se. It's simply a kind of representation of, I thought of it as a tour film and as a way to show these beautiful portraits of people that you'd created live. Now in a different context, in a different moment, I do see the activist impulse behind it.
As I say, it really was, I was very fortunate that I was able to do the finishing in Denmark, and really I did exactly what I wanted to, and I was very sensitive to that issue. I didn't really want it. I wanted it to be about women and not about transgender. Was not the subject really. It was just one of the ways of being a woman. And it had evolved. I mean, and over the years. I mean, when we first did it, I know even in the film, some of the women say it was the first time that they've ever felt proud of being transgender. That we put them up on a pedestal, and they were there, and we were honoring them. We weren't like exploiting them or showing them off. We were showing them as kind of like art objects in a way.
And that brings me to, it's a very elegant way of making, work that could be seen as political or that is political. And that brings me to...
the other thing I wanted to say about that film, I mean, in terms of the rest of my work, it's really, that was a challenge on another level. I mean, working with Antony, I really, both during the show and when I was making the film, I put myself in his world, really, because that's the only way to do it with him. And it's a world that's not a natural, because of his, there's absolutely no camp in it, which is, I'm by nature an ironist, and all of my work is dripping with irony, but I really put the brakes on for this. I really wanted to see if I could do a straight film, straight, sincere. So that was really a challenge also, and I feel like I succeeded. I mean, it's quite different in spirit from the other films that I've done.
Mm-hmm. So then your first, I think of the waning of justice as being related to the illusion of democracy, which was, I think, 2011. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge departure for you, really, in the sense that it was very abstract work that was black and white, silent, and it was composed of numbers. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that turn away. I mean...
Well, it came in a moment. I guess the first numbers piece I did was part of a bigger installation called Tornado Warning. And with that installation, really, I guess I'm not sure if I'd been having a lot of people wanted to show early work or earlier work, and I was kind of tired of not tired, but I'm just not that interested. I wanted to make something new. And this was an opportunity to make something new in a completely different context, and I really wanted to make something that didn't look like anything I'd ever done before. So I kind of had to make some rules, and that were, I tried to think of what's the opposite of everything that I've done. And so I got rid of the body, and in the numbers pieces, I wanted to make something as non-human as possible as I could think of. So the idea I came up with was the idea of numberness, that there would, if human beings didn't exist, there would still be two of something, whether it was called that or not. And I don't know whether, it's the problem of whether we discovered mathematics or whether we invented it. So it's just, I don't know where I come down on that, but so I made a piece, and I didn't really want to have curves in it because that was too, biological. So I made a rule that I would only have straight lines and numbers, and not really all the numbers because I didn't want it to be about numerals. So I made a piece with just straight lines and the numbers 1 through 6. And that was very formal and grid-like, and it was a video installation. And then a year later, I made another one, but I wanted to have more fun with it, so I call it painting by numbers. And so I really went wild with the same cast of characters, but very kind of a wow piece. And then when it came time to do the show, my first show at Luring Augustine in Brooklyn, I made a third piece to go along with it, also a number piece, and to use the space in a certain way that it was tailor-made for their space. And a piece called 143652, also with the numbers 1 through 6, in a very different, stately way, different spirit. And originally I wanted to have sound with it, kind of, but I realized that as you see with this piece, sound spills everywhere, so it would have influenced all the other pieces, so I made a whole silent show. And it was all, people were, when I finally showed, because I had shown the 2 numbers pieces in London, but when I finally showed it all in New York, it was kind of a shock to people who were used to, it kind of defied expectations in a way, because it's not what people associate me with. And some people were disappointed and, didn't get it. And, and I named it Illusion of Democracy because I'm politically I'm a progressive, and I have a lot of political thoughts, but they don't usually enter my work in a very direct way. And I was sort of reflecting on the idea that I made the first number piece before Obama was elected, during that 2008, I guess, and I was pretty worried about what might happen in the world, and I thought, here I am worried, and at the same time I'm doing this completely abstract work. What is the relationship? Is the terrible political situation forcing me to withdraw, or anyway? So that's a feeling that continued, and then when I had a chance to do the piece at Luring Augustine, I wanted people to keep 2 things in mind at once. I felt, even though the title didn't really have so much to do with the actual content of the work, I felt that the title was another way of addressing the audience, the public, a chance to say something, and so I called it The Illusion of Democracy. And then with this piece, the political part came more to the fore. It became more of a subject, metaphorical and actual. And
well, and also camp came back.
And camp came back, yes.
I think it's,
I really feel like at this point, every piece I do, I couldn't have done with everything I've done before, without having done everything I've done before. So, in a sense, I'm kind of, bringing it, all the strands together in a way.
Yeah, well, I think it's, this show to me is very moving because, as a show in itself and as an experience, but also seeing the strands merge, there's something powerful about knowing the history, and it kind of feels like the previous works are contained in it somewhat. And it's, for those of you who haven't yet seen the exhibition, you're in for a treat. But in one room there's I call it a portrait of Lady Bunny, but it is. Yeah, it's a performance of a very famous, beloved drag queen, and it's paired with a very somewhat aloof presentation of sunsets and numbers in the other room. So I
think of it as kind of apocalyptic myself.
Yeah.
I think of, I was trying to, when I had the unusual occasion of being in a situation where I could film the sunset right from the balcony of the place I was living. So I did. But I didn't know, I'm not that interested in nature. It's never been part of my work, but I thought, I'll figure out some way to use it. And And so I thought of all the kinds of metaphors that that a sunset could bring about, and I tried to exploit some of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think the waning of justice paired with the waning of the sunlight is, one of the first things I thought of. And
I mean, I had the title for a long time, and then when Ferguson happened, when the incident, I was like, oh, this is too timely. I don't think, maybe they'll think that that's what I'm talking about. But I decided to go ahead anyway. I thought it would last. The waning of justice would go on.
Yeah, there will be future. It would continue after Ferguson, unfortunately. The other thing that I wondered, because the political content is foregrounded not just by the title, but by Bunny's, Lady Bunny's sort of, tirade or rant about the state of the world. And I thought that was interesting because you do have the distance. It's not you speaking, but you feel like she's somewhat of an...
I've known Bunny for 25 years and, through all of her changes. And I know, having followed her and seen a lot of her shows, that currently she's a very serious political commentator, and which is funny, in a way. And so that was one of the, and I've always wanted to do a portrait of her anyway. So I met with her and I told her that she had to do, I didn't know what I was going to do if she just said no, but I told her she was on my bucket list and that she had to do it. And we had a bunch of lunches and we discussed some of the things that were on my mind, and it synced up with things that she thinks too. So when it was time to film, we knew what the area was where it was going, and then she just turned on the camera and she went.
So that was it's an ad lib kind of, yeah. Well, you all will have time to see it, and I think we should watch your latest work, which I haven't even seen. Okay. Well,
I didn't know that I was going to show any work here, so I didn't really bring any clips, but I happened to have with me this film I made a couple of weeks ago with two of my longtime collaborators, Ann Yobst and Lucy Sexton, called Dance Noise. And they were having a show, a performance show in conjunction with the opening of the new Whitney Museum. And so they asked me to make a film that would be the beginning of their show, and then it has them going into the theater, and then they'd come in those same costumes, and that would be the beginning of the show. So I happened to have that with me, and we shot it in one day at the New Whitney Museum. They let us film there, and they probably will never let anyone do it again, but after what we did. But and the beginning is black. I really haven't finished this film. I have a very clever idea for the title, but it's not there yet. So it's all black, but then the film starts. So. Okay.
I really can't believe they let you do that.
I know. And there were trustees visiting the museum then. I don't know what they thought, but anyway, we did it all one day.
Didn't damage any artwork?
No, there were lots of rules. There were lots of rules, but we were good.
That's great. I love it. Let me check what time it is. I'll see how much time we have left. 7:20. Oh, so we should open it up to questions.
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah. Would anybody like to ask Charlie a question? Mm-hmm. Right here.
Annegret. Sorry. This is not very profound, but
How about this
Doesn't
one?
work. Oh, it does work.
oh, okay. I saw the touring video, and I was wondering where the ladies, who selected the ladies? How did you find them? Because that was amazing.
They're mostly from our kind of community, and Antony had the final choice of the women. Some of them have been in my work earlier, long ago, and I knew about half of them beforehand. And we kind of, they were all really great and different. And
certainly were. And your relationship to Antony,
what?
the musician, how did you? Your relationship with
Well,
him.
Antony is someone I've known for a long time as a friend, and the musicians was his then band, the Johnsons, and that he had worked with on recordings and so on.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was some of this music when he did it was from a previous record, and some was for a record that was to come.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Somebody else?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a big fan of the voluptuous horror of Karen Black, so I was really excited. That was a big treat for me to see Kembra as one of the performers, and I just thought you really hit that pitch perfect in turning with the sincerity. And because I'm not really usually big on sincerity either, but that's exactly what it needed. It was the right thing and felt really right. But my question is, could you talk a little bit about the choice to turn off Lady Bunny's voice, to mute certain things, and how you came to that?
Well, the piece is all one piece, and it just occurred to me when I was editing Lady Bunny. I mean, she had to come out to the same length as everything else, so I had to edit the material in some way, and I decided I didn't want to just do constant jump cuts, so I would just I would just cut the words and have her say what I wanted her to say. So that became a thing, and then it became coordinated with the silences in the other room, because I wanted to have the whole piece silent at certain points. And then at the end, she has her own song, so.
Hi. Earlier, you and I were talking a little bit about technology versus making work. Can you talk about the challenges that you've faced with advancing technology? It's constantly evolving, and how you kind of overcome learning curves in balancing that with the creation of work?
Well, I started out, making work in 1970, and I started out with a Super 8 camera, and then when Merce asked me to collaborate with him, I didn't know video, but I bought a system for the company, and I learned video from a book called Spaghetti City Video Manual, and then I taught it to Merce, and we were using black and white, half-inch open reel, and I was editing with I don't know if you know, the 2.5 turns back. So I've been through everything. And then I was working a 16 millimeter film, and then, later, U-matic. So I've been through all this, and then I got computer editing at home in '92. So that was when that changed. That was the biggest change in my life, because I could work on things that weren't project oriented. I didn't have to be funded for something. I could just work. So I had a lot more fun with things. I could do things just for fun. And then I've continually tried to teach myself new software as much as I'm really into tutorials, and I really find that I can learn, if I ever have the occasion, which I don't often, of working with someone who's a professional in a certain area, like an After Effects artist, I pick up so much just from watching a person that, but I never had that opportunity. So I've learned everything from books, really. And I keep on trying to use technology that I haven't, or see what the possibilities are of what the new things are that I can afford. So as I told you, my current project, I'm doing a 3D film, which I've never done before. And it's going to end up being a live performance, with live cameras and live dancing and live projection, live mixing. But for the first year, we're just doing a film.
I think there's time for one more.
I think the first time I saw your work in a really specific context was when you were setting up for this film you had done with Merce Cunningham, where you had filmed his joints, his knees, and primarily his knees, but the parts of his body that bend. And it occurred to me that your relationship with him was probably really deep and complex, and that piece for me was about the deterioration of the body, among other things. That's the way I perceived it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if those were your thoughts, and furthermore, if your relationship with him had a trajectory that was about sort of capturing somebody moving in their prime and the body breaking down. You know what I mean?
We never dealt with the negative aspect. I mean, of the body, anything about the body breaking down. I mean, I don't even when he wasn't performing anymore, Merce was making work for really technical, difficult work for people with really trained bodies. And then, in his later years, he was performing, but gave himself much different kind of role. When I did that piece, that was from some of I used Super 8 film. That was some of the very first film I ever shot of Merce's joints when I was on tour with him in Irvine, California. And it was a sketch for something I did later. And after he passed away, I found these Super 8 films in my closet, and so I decided to make a piece out of it. And it was sort of a memory piece for me, and the sound is from unpublished recordings from John Cage of environmental sound from different places that he and Merce had been together, so it's in a way kind of romantic. I mean, it's a very personal experience for me, but I don't know for someone who doesn't have that knowledge or background, I don't know what it's like. But it was, I think all of my multi-channel pieces really owe a lot to choreography. I mean, they're all choreographed. And when in that piece there were 10, it's called Joints Quartet for Ensemble. So I thought of it as a chamber ensemble. There were 10 monitors and 4 channels of video, and I mixed them up between the channels in a sort of unpredictable way. But there are moments of, duets and trios and, group unison. And so it's really like either a music or a dance piece. But, and that's the kind of piece that I've been hardly doing anything that's not multi-channel.
One thing that, struck me when I started working with you on your book and writing the text is that I was, of course, aware of your early films with Merce, the dance films in the 70s. And I think, many people know about that, but it's not as many people know that you, after several decades, came back to collaborating with Merce. And so, I think that's kind of remarkable that there's this.
Well, it was unexpected. You know, the history of people in dance companies. I mean, the choreographers are different about how they deal with people who leave them. And Merce used to be a situation of, you know, you're cut off once you're not in the company anymore. You're kind of. I mean, we were still friends, but we really didn't see each other at all. And so I never expected that the circle would close, but I'm so glad that it did. I mean, circumstances caused that to happen, but it ended well.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Charlie, for telling us so much. And
Thank you.